Okay, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer on how a living, breathing environmental management system actually handles major organizational shifts. If you've ever wondered what separates a superficial, paper-pushing exercise from a truly robust, sustainable operation, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're diving into the realities of ISO 14001:2026, and we're going to see exactly how a world-class system stands up to intense scrutiny. Think about it for a second. Imagine your organization is about to undergo a massive facility expansion. We're talking new equipment, totally new raw materials, newly hired staff, and a whole new set of operational demands. Does your environmental management adapt seamlessly to all of that, or does it completely break under the pressure? It's really easy to be compliant when things are static, right? But growth and change, those are the ultimate stress tests. To really ground this, we're going to anchor today's explainer right here, essentially looking over the shoulder of an auditor. Picture this: a lead auditor reviews a comprehensive change request document on a tablet, verifying that environmental impact assessments and resource allocations were completed prior to a facility expansion. They're forensically hunting for absolute proof that the homework was done before a single shovel even hit the dirt. They aren't just checking boxes. They're looking for a system that actively anticipates risk.
Section 1. Defining your EMS boundaries, the scope test under Clause 4.3.
Taking a step back from that tablet for a moment, let's look at the foundational rules this auditor is enforcing right out of the gate. The truth is, you simply cannot audit what hasn't been defined. The scope tells the auditor exactly which activities, products, services, and locations are accountable to the environmental rules. It asks a really fundamental question: where does your responsibility actually begin and where does it end? Whether we're talking about a single manufacturing plant or a complex global supply chain network, those boundaries have to be documented, they have to be maintained, and above all, they have to reflect the actual environmental reality of the business.
Now, here is a massive corporate trap that an auditor is trained to spot from a mile away. Companies often try to artificially limit their scope just to make audits easier. You might have a completely justified exclusion, say an independent contractor whose operations you literally have zero control or influence over. That's fine. But you absolutely cannot unjustifiably exclude a high-emissions transport fleet or a solvent coating facility that you actively manage just because it happens to be hard to regulate.
And that brings us to a brilliant summation of Clause 4.3. Organizations must avoid defining artificially narrow scopes that exclude environmentally significant activities merely to simplify compliance requirements. Your scope boundaries have to reflect true environmental risk, not just organizational convenience. If a manufacturing company tries to certify only its nice, clean administrative offices while completely excluding the factory floor that actually generates hazardous waste, well, that auditor with the tablet is going to issue a major nonconformance immediately. Moving to Section 2, Deep Operational Integration. Built in, not bolted on, under Clause 4.4. This is where we find out if the organization actually walks the walk. Environmental management cannot just be some siloed department down the hall that only speaks up once a year right before an audit. There are 4 continuous, non-negotiable steps to ensure the EMS is a functioning system, not just a static binder gathering dust. You have to establish the framework, actively implement it into daily tasks, maintain it by supplying the actual resources needed, and constantly improve it as new technologies and regulations come into play.
The absolute crucial takeaway here is that environmental accountability has to be distributed across all of your core business functions, from the boardroom straight down to the supply chain. Think about it. When your purchasing department evaluates a new supplier, are they actually looking at environmental compliance? When logistics plans a delivery route, are they factoring in fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions? The auditor wants undeniable proof that environmental thinking is baked right into the organizational DNA.
Section 3. Identifying environmental aspects. The data deep dive under Clause 6.1.2. Zooming back into the granular details, the auditor pulls up the environmental aspect register to see exactly how the company tracks its impact. This right here is the analytical core of the whole system. The auditor expects to see a strict, logical flow. They want proof that a specific activity, like painting on an assembly line, correctly identifies its environmental aspect, which would be solvent emissions. Then, that has to link directly to the actual environmental impact, like air pollution. And finally, what's the specific operational control used to mitigate it? In this case, adopting low VOC technology. If that chain is broken anywhere, you've got an uncontrolled risk. But wait, it doesn't stop at standard daily operations.
The auditor's also going to check if you've evaluated abnormal and emergency conditions. Why? Because environmental disasters don't exactly schedule themselves for a perfect sunny day. If a power failure causes a refrigeration unit to leak, or if an extreme weather event floods your chemical storage area, your EMS must have already anticipated that exact scenario and put controls in place.
Section 4. Mastering Plan Change. The catalyst of change under Clause 6.3.
All right, now we reach the climax of our audit, bringing our focus right back to that major facility expansion we talked about earlier. This is exactly where organizations stumble the hardest. An auditor expects to see a rigid chronological sequence. Say you have the initial trigger or idea for the expansion in month 1. Before you ever get to implementation in month 3, month 2 is completely non-negotiable. This is the stage where the environmental impacts of the expansion are systematically evaluated, and budgets for things like new emission scrubbers or specialized training are explicitly allocated. You simply cannot leapfrog from the idea phase to the implementation phase without doing the environmental math first.
So when that lead auditor is swiping through the tablet, these are the precise documents they're requiring to verify that the change isn't introducing a ton of uncontrolled risks. They want comprehensive impact assessments to ensure the new facility doesn't spawn new hazardous waste streams. They check resource approvals so they know the environmental team actually has the budget to manage the site. They look for updated environmental objectives. And crucially, they want revised training records showing your staff actually knows how to run the new environmentally controlled equipment.
Because here is the ultimate warning. Unmanaged change is the absolute enemy of a functioning EMS. If a company skips the planning phase and just decides to build the new facility in a rush to increase production, they are risking severe regulatory violations. It disrupts existing controls, creates massive compliance gaps, and introduces risks that literally no one ever evaluated. To an auditor, an unmanaged change is just a giant, glaring red flag.
Which brings us to Section 5, the auditor's final verdict. Dynamic environmental management.
As the auditor finishes reviewing that comprehensive change request on their tablet, satisfied that the facility expansion was actually masterfully planned, we arrive at the core truth of all this. This isn't just about passing a test. A truly successful, compliant organization doesn't just survive an audit. It uses these rigorous steps to drive continuous, sustainable improvement. It ensures the system reflects reality, bakes accountability into daily decisions, systematically identifies impacts, and proactively plans for every single major organizational shift long before it happens.
So, I'm going to leave you with this thought. Take a really hard look at your own processes and ask yourself, is your environmental management truly ready for your next big operational shift? Or is it just a binder sitting quietly on a shelf? Because, as we've seen today, when the auditor shows up and starts swiping on that tablet, a living, adaptable system is literally the only thing standing between successful growth and critical failure. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep innovating responsibly.